Hello, I'm Pavel Nomov.
Hi, this is Jia Tao. Today, we're going to talk about the formal semantics of responsibility. In the literature, there have been two different approaches to defining responsibility. The first approach is based on what later became known as Frankfurt's principle of alternative possibilities. It says that a person is responsible for what has done if and only if he could have prevented it from happening. We refer to this form of responsibility as blameworthiness. The other form is to hold a person responsible for the outcome if the person sees to that the outcome happens. We refer to that form as responsibility for seeing to it. In this paper, we show that these two forms of responsibility are actually different. More specifically, blameworthiness can be defined through seeing to it, but not vice versa. To illustrate their difference, let's first look at an example. Consider two strategic games, the left one and the right game. In both games, we have two agents, mom and dad. Their goal is to prevent the baby from crying. Each of them has three strategies. Mom has M1, M2, and M3, and dad has D1, D2, and D3. Each cell of the table represents an action profile. Consider a situation when mom chooses M2 and the dad chooses M3. Then in the left game, you'll see that baby cries. According to the principle of alternative possibilities, mom is actually blamable for the baby crying because mom could have chosen the strategy M1, then the baby will not cry. On the other hand, in the right game, mom is not blamable for baby crying because she has no unilateral strategy to prevent the baby from crying. What about the responsibility of seeing to it? In the right game, under this same strategy action profile M2 and D3, the baby cries. Under this same situation, as mom guarantees that the baby cries with her action M2, mom is indeed responsible for seeing to the fact that the baby cries. However, she is not responsible for seeing to the baby crying in the left game because her action M2 does not unavoidably lead to the baby crying. To further illustrate the difference of the two forms of responsibility, we also consider some examples from the literature. The first example comes from David Lewis' 2000 paper. Suppose that there is a glass bottle. The situation can actually be captured by a strategic game between two agents, Susie and Billy. Each of them has two actions, to throw a rock at the bottle or to not throw the rock at the bottle. The bottle is broken if either player decides to throw a rock. In this case, neither Billy nor Susie is blamable for the broken bottle. Because if one does not throw the rock, the other one might throw the rock. So the bottle might still be shattered. However, each of them indeed sees to the fact that the bottle shatters. The second example still contains two players, Anne and Bob. It comes from Joe Harper's 2016 book, Causality. In this example, Anne negligently spills gasoline, and Bob carelessly throws a cigarette into the spilled gasoline. Their actions cause a fire. In this specific case, both Anne and Bob individually are blamable for the fire. However, each of them does not see to the fact of the fire. Because if Anne does not negligently spill the gasoline, the fire would not happen. And if Bob does not carelessly throw the cigarette, the fire would also not happen.
Jay just talked to you about those two forms of replaceability in games with perfect information. In this paper, we generalize those notions to games with imperfect information. And by games with imperfect information, I mean games with multiple initial states where agents might not be able to distinguish some of those states. The connection between knowledge and responsibility has been known for a long time, and it probably goes back to Aristotle's Ethics, where he said that blame is definable in terms of knowledge and the action that agents take. Now let's talk how we incorporate knowledge into our definition of blameworthiness and seeing to it. In case of blameworthiness, we require that not only there is an agent, there is an action for agent to prevent the outcome, but agent must know this action or must know this strategy. In other words, that action, that strategy should work not just in the current state, but in all states that the agent cannot distinguish from the current state. On the other hand, when we talk about seeing to it, not only we require that the action of the agent guarantees the outcome, but agent also must know this. In other words, that action must guarantee the outcome in all states indistinguishable from the current state. Let me now go to an example, and I will use prisoner's execution as my example. Imagine that a shooter is shooting into a prisoner. In this case, shooter is blamable for the death because shooter could have easily prevented the death by not shooting or by shooting into the air. Also, by pulling the trigger, shooter knows that prisoner will die. So shooter is seeing to the death of a prisoner. Now, of course, in most cases, executions are not done by a single shooter. Instead, people use firing squads. Coincidentally, last year, then President of the United States, Donald Trump, authorized use of firing squads for federal executions. In case of firing squad, none of the shooters is actually blamable for the death because none of them have a strategy to prevent it. There is always a chance that somebody else will shoot and kill the prisoner. Yet, they are still all seeing to the death because each of the individual actions of shooting guarantees the death, and they all know this. It's interesting, however, that firing squads not always are done the way I just described. This is another American president, Dwight Eisenhower, who in 1947, before he became president, signed this procedure for military executions in US Army. If we look at section 2 of this document, then item G says that not all guns used by shooters should be loaded. Some of them should be left unloaded or filled with blank ammunition. This is also known as conscious bullet. If conscious bullet is used, then the shooter does not know that his gun is loaded. He always leaves possibility that it might not be loaded, and therefore the shooter does not know that his individual action of pulling the trigger is guaranteed to lead to the death of the prisoner. As a result, in firing squads with conscious bullets, not only none of the shooters is blamable, but also none of them is seeing to the death of a prisoner. So to summarize what happens here, if you have a single shooter, then it's blamable and you see to it. In case of a firing squad without conscious bullet, none of shooters are blamable, but they all see to the death. And finally, in case of conscious bullet, none of shooters are blamable and none of them are seeing to the death. In this paper, we formalize those two notions of responsibility in setting of game with imperfect information. Our formal definition of a game is on the screen. It has initial states, it has equivalence relations between states, set of actions for all agents to use in different states, set of outcomes, and set P captures the rules of the game. That is, it captures what kind of transitions are possible from one state to another. Using those games, we define formal syntax and semantics of our logical system. The system has three modalities. KA is ex-ante knowledge, or knowledge of the agent before any kind of actions are taken. ST is seeing to it, and as I described earlier, agent A sees to it, but phi happens if, under the action of agent A, in all states indistinguishable to agent A, that action leads to phi. We'll also add this extra condition that sometimes is called seeing deliberately. It says that phi didn't have to happen. So there was a chance, there was some kind of play on which phi would not happen. This is to guarantee that an agent would not be held responsible for tautologies or for statements like 2 + 2 = 4. Finally, blameworthiness modality is defined as phi is true and agent had a strategy that would prevent phi in all initial states which are indistinguishable to the state to the agent from the current state.
So we have two main results. The first result is the definability of blameworthiness. It is in theorem 1. It says that an agent is blamable for phi if and only if phi is true, and A sees to it that A does not see to it that phi is false. The second result is the undefinability of the seeing to it modality ST through the blameworthiness modality B. To show this is true, to show the undefinability, we constructed two games. And using these three lemmas, we show that these two games are actually indistinguishable in the language that does not use modality seeing to it. However, they are distinguishable in the language that indeed contains the seeing to it modality. Thank you very much for watching our video and being here with us.
Thank you, and we hope to see you next year at IJCAI in person.